Good morning. I'm Jeff Spraggins. I'm from Godby High School in Tallahassee, Florida. And today my lesson is going to be on a couple of things to do with unmanned aircraft systems. One is weather. We're going to start with a weather briefing. Normally I would do that with the students present here and they would perform the briefing and then I would critique them. We'd cover that. We'll go through that in a few minutes, but the main goal and the main focus of my lesson today is human factors in unmanned aircraft systems. It's kind of ironic that I consider, and most people I think would also agree with me, that the most important part of an unmanned aircraft system is the man in the loop. However, with a human being in the loop, we bring some human factor issues that we'll discuss. Some good issues, some positive things that humans bring to the unmanned aircraft system, very positive things, and I think they outweigh the negatives. But there are some negative factors, and we'll discuss those in the lesson today. Thank goodness it's Monday. I'm doing this lesson on a Monday, so I hope for you guys, you're more like the humans in this picture instead of the cat or the dog. But it is an exciting lesson. We have videos. We got the clicker set up for near the end for an assessment of what you learned today. And we also have a little game set up to kind of cement the idea of this, the human factors in the unmanned aircraft system. METAR, Meteorological Aviation Report, we'll talk about today. We'll go through, like I said, a student report, human factors, the good and the bad, video clickers, games, and at the end, I like to end my course every day with a short 5 to 10 minutes of actual flying with the unmanned aircraft system. Now for this video, we won't be doing that, and there's some shortcuts I've made in the lesson today, just because we don't have the students present. But in a normal classroom, that's how every day we do the flying as well with the unmanned aircraft system. And we do it with some the day's lessons in mind. Today we would concentrate on the flying portion, making the call to resource management, how you manage between the human factors, making sure you make the appropriate calls, making sure you're clearing, wearing the appropriate safety equipment, and working amongst yourself. And some of that will be evident after our lesson today, some proper or improper procedures to avoid, and some proper procedures that you should follow. Learning goals for today: be able to describe the good and bad of human involvement in unmanned aircraft systems, specifically be able to describe how humans can enhance or degrade UAS operations by understanding inattention blindness. We'll cover inattention blindness. We'll cover the definition, short video, thanks to the USI, the safety course, showed me a great video, and I decided to share that as part of my lesson today. But also be able to describe the human's ability to unscramble words and phrases. That's a positive. There's several positive factors, but this was one of them I came up with that can actually, humans do things a little bit different than, we can do some things that computers can't do. We'll talk about that here shortly. And be able to obtain an aviation weather report from the internet, translate the weather, make future weather predictions based on the report. This is from a Florida standard, and so normally what I would do at this portion, I would bring I usually have 2 student volunteers. 2 students would come up, they would use their cell phones or my iPad, they would get the weather, the meteorological weather for either Tallahassee Regional Airport, or sometimes we pick up an airport for the day. They brief the weather, they translate all the abbreviations, and we discuss is it a good day to fly. They compute the crosswinds. They determine also, based on the temperature and dew point, if we should be worried about fog, and also we look at the altimeter setting every day, and we look at the trend of the altimeter. Is the trend for barometer rising or falling? And that will tell us give us a basic idea of if the weather is going to be good today or not. So we would spend normally about 5 to 10 minutes to start the class off. It's kind of almost, it's our bell ringer for my aviation and unmanned aircraft systems classes. It's a chance for them to get involved in the class, and they become very enthusiastic. And so we spend about 5 to 10 minutes on the weather report, and we relate it to the actual flying. For example, for the Cessna, if there's more than 5 knots of crosswind, we talk about, if we were at Embry-Riddle, we wouldn't be taking off. We talk about the limits on the unmanned aircraft system too, as far as not only the weather limits, visibility limits, but also the crosswinds or any adverse conditions that would affect our flying, to make it practical. But the big focus of our goal today is this human factors, the good and the bad of human factors. Quote of the day, I like to throw in a quote every day, talk about both the philosopher and the quote itself. Ralph Waldo Emerson was a philosopher, American philosopher. I guess you could say he's a naturalist as well. He's known as spending a year on Walden Pond, kind of pondering life itself. And he came up with some writings, some quotes, and here's one of my favorites. Who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you're saying. Humans not only speak, but sometimes their actions speak very loud. So when you're involved in any operation, especially operations, for example, if you're a pilot or if you're an operator, visual observer of an unmanned aircraft system or a pilot of an actual aircraft, there's going to be interactions between you and the other crew members. And sometimes what you don't say is almost as important as what you actually say. So you need to be very careful how you come across and make sure that you say what you mean, and make sure you're thinking about what you say, and especially when it comes to resource management between two crew members, make sure that you're, if you have concerns. For example, in my experience in the aircraft, there were times where I was flying with a more experienced pilot, and I tended to, if he was making minor errors, I would tend to keep that internal and not say something, and I think that was wrong. I think anytime there were things that should have been said, I should have brought those up. But I was reluctant because I thought he knew more about flying than I did, and therefore there was a reason for what he was doing. And there were several times I really regret that I didn't speak up. Nothing that caused a major accident or anything, but looking back on my career, I think that was something I learned from human factors, or communication error that I had, was I was holding things in thinking that person knew more than I did, when in reality that wasn't necessarily the case. And even if it was, even if that person did know, even if that more experienced pilot knew more than I did, if he's making an error or she's making an error, it's very important for me to speak up in that case. Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. And you know, in the school environment too, for my high school students, very important. This is what you wear, how you carry yourself. Speak so loudly, sometimes people can't hear exactly what you're saying. Okay, human factors, lots of things, opportunities to interact with humans. For example, here's some of the possible positions you could have in a typical unmanned aircraft system operation. This would be related to perhaps an operation system that is either in development, because you've got a project manager, a mission coordinator, and range safety officer. Now, some of those will be involved in more of the large aircraft systems, but you could, in some of your experimental aircraft, unmanned aircraft systems, you could involve these kind of people as well, especially in the initial stages. But specifically on every mission, you're going to have an air vehicle operator, very minimum, and usually a visual observer as well. You could have a sensor operator working the camera or whatever sensor that you have on board, as well as a maintenance crew. If you're working at a range safety officer. If you're working near an airport, you'll be talking to the airport folks. You might be talking to the contractor that's contracted you to fly the mission today. For example, in our case of flying the agricultural mission, you might be talking to the farmer, you might be talking to the farmer, and maybe some of the visual observers that you have at different stations. So it's lots of chances for human interaction with the unmanned aircraft system operations. Lots of opportunities for good and for bad. It all starts with understanding or having good situational awareness, Then we have to relay the information. Then the receiver has to understand what we are communicating. 3 parts to communication. You've got a sender, you've got a receiver, and the message in between the two. Keep that in mind. And that's really what I'm saying here. It all starts with understanding how good situational awareness. The sender of the message, if you're going to send a message to someone, if you're going to talk every day, if you're sending a message that makes sense, which we all want to do, a message that is thought out and can be communicated, you need to have good situational awareness. First off, does your receiver speak the same language as a first language? If not, perhaps you need to go a little slower, or perhaps you need to enunciate better. You need to know the situational awareness. You need to know things like, how experienced is that person I'm talking to? Where's that person from, even if they speak the same language? For example, if you're from Alabama, which I am, and you're speaking to a person from New Jersey, there are certain things that I say that person might not understand, and vice versa. So be careful what you say. Have good situational awareness, not only on that person, but the environment as well, in order to get a good message across. And we'll talk about situational awareness a little bit more. Relaying the information. Normally we just talk, but it could be through a radio. You could have garbled transmission. You got to be careful and go slow on certain radios. It could be that you're communicating by your cell phone. So be aware of the medium, how you're relaying the information. And the receiver has to understand what it is you meant to say. Not necessarily what you said, but what you meant to say. When you get a good team together that's communicating really well, you'll find that this goes much smoother when the receiver kind of can almost read the sender's mind. Now, with that said, this brings, in some cases, a built-in error too, so you have to be careful, because the receiver knows this person so well. Oh, that's what he meant to say, even though he said something else. That's when you get in trouble. So you have to understand what it is you're trying to communicate. We're going to do a little game here in a minute and kind of show you how that can be an issue. This both the relaying of the information and understanding what it is that was meant to be said. Equipment design in the unmanned aircraft system. This could be a ground control station. You know, the typical ground control station nowadays for the more advanced system is very ergonomically designed to facilitate the operator. You've got the display at proper viewing angle. You're in a comfortable position. Human factors bring in all these things like this. Not only, you know, if you're operating a UAV like a Predator, Global Hawk, or something like this, you'll have a more complicated even ground station than this, ergonomically designed for your comfort and also for proper communications and stuff like this. This is probably the medium level ground control station. High level being the more advanced, you know, as I said, Predator, Global Hawk, some of the larger unmanned aircraft systems. But the more basic, probably the ones you're going to be dealing with, might be as simple as your cell phone. Like when we fly our drone in class, when we fly our Paradrone. Or the iPad, those are the more typical. Or the joystick, it's also very common now, type of ground control station. It has built in all these ground control stations. Although they're designed for the human interface, they have their problems, and it causes some communication difficulties. One of those communication difficulties is, remember when I talked about situational awareness? The person passing the message and the person receiving has to have heightened situational awareness, or at least situational awareness of what is really going on is all situational awareness is. We talked about this a lot when I was an instructor pilot, whether the student had good situational awareness. Very key to good flying in the pilot world, the manned aircraft world, but just as important in the unmanned aircraft system is high situational awareness. And problems that can cause less situational awareness, or not as heightened situational awareness, perceived versus reality. Our eyeballs, and as a matter of fact, this is an assignment I give my students in my photography class, is I have them put a subject in the foreground, a subject in the background, and try to back up enough where they can get both in focus at a focal length where both this and this object is in focus, and you can really get some perception issues that are not accurate. In other words, this person's not pinching the Eiffel Tower, this person's not holding up the moon, but it appears to be because you put the position of the object and the two subjects and got them in focus. The human eye sees that and perceives reality to be different than it is. This can cause some situational problems because of the limited vision in the UAV. Especially when you're using the video mode. If you're watching the UAV, you also have perception problems because sometimes you can't tell exactly which, what position the UAV is in. Is it turning? Is it turning to the left? Is it climbing? I can't really tell with some of the UAVs, especially the quadcopters sometimes give you that perception problem because you can't see a nose and a typical tail like an aircraft. Our vision is limited, our perceived may not equal reality. This decreases our situational awareness, both on the sender and the receiver's end. This could cause some problems. Another problem, inattention blindness. Inattention blindness, the definition is perceptual blindness. Perceive. What you perceive is not necessarily accurate. And it's a psychological lack of attention. Magicians use this perceptual blindness to trick you. And this next video, I think you'll see what I mean. It's a short video, it's about 2 minutes, and we'll cut to that.
Watch this next sequence carefully. At the end, I'll ask you a question about what you've seen.
Hi, I'm Magic Singh, and today we're in Portobello Road, and I'm going to show you guys a classic in magic, using matches. And today to help me out, here's Mark. Mark, tell you what, place your hand up for me nice and flat. Now, I promise this won't hurt, alright? So here's the idea, let's just light this up, and if you close onto that nice and tight, here we go, watch this.
Keep watching.
I don't know if you felt that or not. I'll tell you what, have a look inside. Open it up. See how the match is actually returned into the book, and it's still burnt. Okay, you're not impressed. Alright, it was my first trick ever. But here's the idea. Just place that back in your hand, close it tight, and turn it face down again if you can. Now we're going to use one more thing, and we're going to use a magician's best friend, playing cards. Now the idea is really simple. You're going to choose one, so take any one you like. Perfect. Have a look for yourself. And do me a favour, show the camera as well if you can. Brilliant. And you know what? Place it back face up on the deck. Now, it doesn't matter if I see what the card is, because we're going to do something completely different. Just watch this. Here we go. On it slowly. Watch the king. I don't know if you felt that or not. Tell you what, have a look inside. Open it up. Aha. Check it out.
It's the King of Diamonds, our card.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Did you watch the trick closely? This is a famous illusion called inattention blindness. This illusion is not about the magic. While watching the routine, you may or may not have noticed the changes taking place. The question is, how many changes did you see? Was there 1? Were there 3? Or were there 5?
Okay, this is when we use the clickers, and I turn it over to the students. We have the clickers from the technology folks, and they vote 1, 2, 3, or 5, and then we talk about we talk about if it was 1, 3, or 5. Then I cut back to the film, and show them how many actual changes there were.
The answer is there were 3 changes. The first change was the red hanky to a green one. The second was his shirt swapping to a t-shirt. The last was his assistant becoming a completely different person. How many did you see?
So why is it?
Okay, and then we spent a few minutes with the students talking about why we missed these changes, very obvious change. When I watched this for the first time at the Safety Institute, I was really astounded that I had not noticed the change in the person who's the actual volunteer. I was so inattentively blind because my son happens to be a magician. And there's a few tricks I've been able to catch just by watching what he's doing as distractors. Usually magicians will do something to distract your attention, either with their hands or some other body movement. And that's what I was watching. I was not watching the big picture. So this is a case, this is where perception can differ from reality. Humans can be inattentively blind. Now, let's apply this to the UAV, the UAS world. In unmanned aircraft systems, or even the aviation as a pilot, there are times, flying especially as a pilot, I would focus very clearly on one instrument, or maybe a group of instruments, and I would fail to see other things when I was very inexperienced. As I became more experienced, I got better at it, and I reached a peak. And studies have shown that's once you've reached that competent level, you're about as safe as you're going to be. And then I reached another stage where I assume things. I would assume if I'm on airspeed and altitude that perhaps another parameter of flying was okay too, and I would assume some things because I've done this a million times. That indicator is pointing to the station, but it's got an off lag. I wasn't even paying attention to the off lag in the indicator. And a critical thing was missed because I'm inattentively blind. I'm focused in on what I think is important, and sometimes it's inaccurate. So you need to be really careful as a human that you don't focus in too much and become blind to the big picture. Sometimes I would have to just get back and what's the big picture? What's the worst thing that can happen here to refocus my attention? Communication all starts with understanding, having good situation awareness, having relayed information that the receiver has to understand. Let's talk about relaying information. Do you think you heard what I thought I said? Think about that phrase, and think about it in your daily communication. But most importantly, at least as far as today's class is concerned, when you're flying your unmanned aircraft system at the end of class, make sure you're saying what you mean to say to your visual observer. Make sure you're meaning what you're trying to say to the air traffic controller. When you're in the big UAV world, when you're out there flying your UAV, perhaps on a mission, make sure you're very clear in what you say, and if you perceive that that person is having problems understanding, restate it, re-enunciate, perhaps enunciate better, or use more clear language. The next video is a short video, and it runs a couple of minutes. It shows how communication in a humorous way can break down.
So you better get used to the idea.
You just stay here. I'll make sure he doesn't leave the room. All right? Thank you. Oh, I remember. Can he leave the room with us? No. You just keep him in here. I'll make sure. Oh, yes, we'll keep him in here, obviously. But if he has to leave, and we will with him, keep him in here until you or anyone else, just me, just you, get back. Right? Right, we'll stay here until you get back. And make sure he doesn't move. What?
Monty Python is one of my favorite groups, but it was they're a comedy troupe, really big in the late 70s and 80s, and they make some points in this case about communication, how you can miscommunicate, misunderstand, kind of cements that thing I talked about where you got the sender and the receiver not understanding the same message for whatever reason that might be. Receiver has to understand what it is we are communicating. Wasn't happening in the Monty Python skit. The human brain is amazing. Now we talked about a couple of problems, inattention blindness, or the fact that sometimes the perception versus reality, so you don't understand exactly what it is the sender is trying to say. But the human being in the loop is also probably very good. We do a lot of things better than machines do. We can take in a lot of information, make moral decisions, make decisions based on rules that we know are out there, and make some decisions that a computer is still not capable at the level that we are, especially when you bring in the moral sense. When I say the moral sense, I'm talking about what is really the right thing to do based on all the circumstances you understand. Read the following. Normally I'll spend a few minutes with this and I have a student volunteer read it from start to finish, and in my classes I've found they're able to read this like most of us are, almost completely without any issues. And it's a way that humans can take in this information and do it better than a machine can. An example of how computers are still not at the stage that the human brain is every time I type a text message, it spell corrects me. It thinks it knows what I want to say. And I would venture to guess that probably 50% of the time it's right. But 50% of the time it's wrong. And of that 50%, about 10% of the time, it's so wrong that it sends an opposite message. Or it puts a phrase in there that I really, really wouldn't want to send to the person I'm sending it to. And I'm sure you guys have had the same thing. Sometimes I hit send before I realize that it's been spell corrected. And I'm very embarrassed. So this is a case where humans are actually better than the machine interface, the computer world. We're not there yet. We're getting close in the computer world of where they can understand things, but the human in the loop is critical, especially for those very, very important missions that involve life or death, or even the unmanned aircraft system. The human in the loop, the operator, is still an important part of that. How to communicate effectively or not. This is the part of the class where we break up. I normally bring up about 5 students. I have them come up to the front of the class here. I have them turn around and face the class. So I've got my 5 students. And then I tell them the rules, pass a phrase from one person to the other. We're going to start with number 1 student. He's going to pass the phrase quietly, whispering in the ear of number 2. Number 2 is going to whisper in number 3's ear, the message. Number 4's ear, and number 5's ear. Number 5 is going to write the message he or she heard up here. Now, as these students up here are turned around, they're facing, just as I am, they're facing the class. The other students get to see this message up here. This is the first message that I whisper in number 1's ear. Moody mummies munch on moldy mothballs. Then, by the time it gets to the end, the last student writes that up. Invariably, the message is not the same that it started. Invariably, you will get something different than this message. And then I use that opportunity to ask the students why. Why was this message garbled at the end? Well, one, it's almost nonsensical. So students sometimes will say what they think it said instead of what it actually said. Sometimes they just misunderstand. And usually what I'll do too is I'll have the class whisper, talk in the background, shuffle their desks around to create a little bit of ambient noise in the background, which is normal in class, which is normal in the hallway, which is normal in a student environment, is that background noise. That too can create problems. And we do this on a couple of occasions. I have them sit down and then the next set of students come up. And usually, not always, sometimes the second group's a little bit better because they understand the rules. And I say, well, if that's the case, if we did do a little bit better on the second one, I say, why do you think that is? And usually they come up with, we knew what we were expecting. It's going to be a nonsense phrase, so we're listening for nonsense and we're passing it down the line. Those are some kind of things. And then we talk about how this has to do with UAV operations and how this can impact in a negative way UAV operations. I bring up the fact that sometimes you're communicating with several people down the line before it gets to the final person, so you need to be very clear. You need to use standard terminology, and we talk about the phonetic alphabet, why we use it in the aircraft world, why we Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, why we use those things, because you know everybody understands it. We're on the same level playing field, and it's kind of cements our learning goal. Next part of class, this is, we've got 2 segments left. Normally for this segment of class, it'll be a little runway check where we use the clickers. METAR stands for Message, Traffic, and Reporting. I'll have the students vote on this, that they have their clickers. After every question, I'll say, well, one person got that wrong, and I won't highlight the person, but I'll just say, everybody understands if they got it wrong, we'll go through the correct answer at each one of them. Inattention blindness is a very effective communications. The human operator can perceive reality better than normal because of enhanced visuals. We talk about some why that's not the case. Monty Python is now my favorite comedy, just to keep them engaged and kind of keep the classroom environment fun. Communication includes 3 factors: sender, message, receiver. Most of these questions aren't meant to be trick questions, so just straightforward. And I also tell them, and I stick to it, most of these questions I have on these end of days, they'll see again either on a quiz or on an exam later on. The most important element of UAS operations is the UAV or drone. Hopefully they say no, that's the human part of the interface. If not, then I explain that it is. And inattention blindness and communication errors can degrade UAS operations, absolutely. Humans' ability to take in the big picture and unscramble words, phrases, and complicated text can enhance UAS operations. The human in the loop, can it enhance UAS operations? Yes. Can it degrade? Yes, it does both, but it certainly can enhance UAS operations. So we bring it full loop. Do you think you heard what I thought I said? And we turn it over to the flying portion of the class, which lasts about 5 minutes. I have them pull out the Parrot drone, assemble it. We have, normally the classroom is set up with a runway. I have them do the, wear the safety equipment, do the normal radio calls. And today we're a little bit, in today's lesson, we pay a little more attention to the communication portion to really cement today's lesson. And finally, the learning goals, which I would go over one more time at the end of class. That would conclude my class. And that concludes my lesson today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it down there.